Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About It. This is Susan Johnson, and I'm here with my co-host, Dennis O'Brien. And have we got a fabulous guest for you this evening, don't we, Dennis?
Yes, we do. We sure do.
All right.
Okay, I'm all excited. You can tell.
I am
let's
too.
manage
I can't even talk.
expectations here.
We are absolutely thrilled to have our House Majority Leader, Jason Rojas. And Jason and I, Representative Rojas and I, came in to the Capitol at the same time.
Not many members of our class left.
It's just
in the
you
house.
and me.
Yeah, in the
we're,
house.
we're the only two left,
Yep.
and now Jason is the majority leader. But he's done so many things at the Capitol. He worked on he was the chairman of Planning and Development back in the day. Then he chaired the big Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, and now he is the majority leader, and I am really honored to serve with him as a deputy majority leader. And what we do there is we screen all the bills once they get voted out of committee. So we have a lot of work that'll be coming up real shortly, right, Jason?
Yeah, no, I always think it's good to talk about that because people wonder what exactly I do as a majority leader.
Yeah.
I like to look at myself in the office as like the chief operating officer. We kind of keep the process moving. So you made the point. I don't think people really realize once any of the 26, 27 committees are done reporting out all their bills, well, they come to us. And on a weekly basis, we will read all of those bills.
Yes, we do.
And I don't know that every legislator reads every bill. Probably not. But we have the responsibility to do so, and we do that. And we make a lot of important decisions about whether that bill needs to go to another committee because something in that bill is the cognizance of another committee. And, of course, what people don't know is our Republican colleagues do the same thing. They have a very similar process, and we actually work collaboratively with them. They'll screen all the bills, and naturally they want the bills to go to more committees than we would like because every time a bill goes to another committee, it increases the chances that that bill's not going to survive. So it is a back-and-forth negotiation with our colleagues across the aisle, but it's very productive and done in a collaborative way. But we keep the process moving. And then obviously on the days we're in session, we are responsible for running the floor.
Yeah.
Right? So that's lining up what bills we're going to do on a day, making sure all the chairs are ready, making sure amendments are filed, making sure fiscal notes are on there so that we can have a debate and pass legislation.
That's a big job you have, Jason Rojas. And one of the things I like about you and that job is you do a lot of speaking in front of the legislature, and I get to see you on TV.
Yeah, that's right.
On
Yeah.
CTN, and
It's always our spouses who are watching, wondering when we're going to get home.
well, I'm watching because I'm interested.
Okay, good. My wife less so.
But I think that's a good, that's a lower level need for me. But I do want to, I've always been interested in what goes on at the Capitol.
Sure.
For years, I was a legal aid lawyer for 23 years. I used to go down and help Rafi Podolsky with.
Yes.
Bills. I'm sure you know Rafi.
I know him very well. If you work on housing, you know Rafi Podolsky.
I did, yeah, I was the chair of the housing task force for
Yep.
statewide legal aid, and I did a lot of housing work way back when they were still building 236 Section 236 housing, which there's been no new ones for a long time. I remember Squire Village, I believe, was
In Manchester.
in
Okay.
Manchester.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's doing well.
I was involved in a big lawsuit with them once. And
Really?
It was about admissions and stuff like that.
Got it.
Whatnot. We sued a project here in Wyndham, and they were a 236 too, Wyndham Heights. And when we went down and did a deposition down at HUD in Washington, they let us know that there was a Section 8 program that we didn't know anything about. This is a long time ago. And we came back with the owners, and the owners decided to make the project entirely Section 8.
Okay.
And that's like a lot of units.
Yeah.
So it was a good thing for the people of this area who were needy and really needed help.
Well, and that's one of the bigger issues why we've been so focused on housing, right?
Sure.
Because the private marketplace is not going to solve for addressing the needs of our most vulnerable neighbors,
Right.
and particularly those folks who are at the lowest end of the income spectrum, right?
Yeah.
No developer can get a project financed based on those lower rents, and it becomes a question of, well, who's going to step forward and do that?
Right.
And often it's government that is going to fit that need, and we have a lot of people, I'm sure here in Wyndham and across eastern Connecticut, who have significant housing needs or are cost burdened, are spending more than 50% of their income just to be housed, right? And when you're spending that much money, you don't have money for health care, you don't have money for food, God forbid you want to take a vacation of some kind, you definitely don't have money for that.
One of the things you talked about a lot when you were putting this bill forward was homelessness. And Susan Johnson can tell you that we have a big homeless problem right here where you're sitting in Willimantic.
Yeah, well, I imagine that Willimantic is the hub of the region
It is.
for providing those services.
Well,
right?
thank you for that. We really are. We have the Holy Family Shelter for the families. We have the Project Hope shelter year-round now for all people who are single. And then we have the domestic violence shelter here as well. And in Eastern Connecticut, all of Eastern Connecticut, there are only 3 towns with homeless shelters: Danielson, Wyndham, and New London. And the rest of the towns don't do anything. And so that to me is kind of strange. And as you know, we only have 17 towns statewide
Right, I was just
that
gonna say.
have homeless shelters. And I don't think that the other surrounding towns really fully appreciate the good work that towns like ours do, and the fact that we really need to have the support and the resources to make sure we are helping with all the needs of the people who find themselves in that very, very difficult. I'd say poverty is an absolute horror, and that being homeless is just the worst horror that you could possibly live through.
Right. There's nothing more insecure than not knowing where you're going to sleep. in a given
Yes.
night. Or
Gotta
if you-
be,
yeah.
gotta be. I don't know the feeling directly, but
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
known people that have been in that situation, and I just can't imagine it.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah.
It
And that's why it's been such a big issue for us, for you and I, and for Democrats here in Connecticut on this issue. Our Republican colleagues do. I believe they care about the issue. I think they think about the solutions in a different way.
Definitely.
But we got to get real about this because it's a very real issue for increasing numbers of people, particularly over the last couple of years. Have we seen 10 and 20% increases in the number of individuals who are homeless at any
Exactly.
given time?
Well, I just want to say, I think that many of the colleagues that we serve with who are Republicans have very kind hearts,
Yeah.
understanding how the systems work in terms of outside the scope of the district that they represent. They really don't understand it, whereas people like me and you have to actually, and Dennis as well, have to really understand all the funding systems, because if we don't, we're not going to be able to make the right votes, make the right comments when the bills come out, because the systems that we've had in the state are really not as effective as they could be. But you have been working very, very hard on the housing systems, and I wanted to just go in to share with our listening audience some of the amazing work you've done with housing, because that is not an easy task.
No, it isn't. It's quite of a slog of an issue, particularly in a place like Connecticut, right, where we put such a premium on local control and local governance, which is important to me too, and it's something
Yes.
I value. But I value it up to a limit, right? Up to a point where we're not seeing the kind of progress that we know needs to be made on a lot of important issues. And again, zoning is one issue. It is not the only cause of the challenges that we
Right.
have around housing. But as I often like to say, people is like, well, we can't control the price of lumber, and we can't control labor, and we can't control land. Yeah, but there are some things we can control.
Right.
And if we can control them, we should act on those when we can, to try to move the needle on ensuring that we can get different types of housing built that really meet the demands that are out there. And there are increasing demands for multifamily housing and certainly for affordable housing. But we also know that people, we romanticize the notion of the single-family home, and I totally appreciate that. I have a single-family home that I own too. But what we need to do is, like many families, I grew up in multifamily housing. I grew up in low-income multifamily housing, and it provided my family the opportunity, right, to have stability, have a place to go and live every night, to have a safe neighborhood.
Means a lot.
Right, it means a lot. And now my
Absolutely.
brother, my sister,
Vital.
myself all own a home, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it's
part of the
fabulous.
progress that we need to make.
And that's the way that it should work, and that's the way it used to work until they stopped subsidizing the development of places where you had a housing authority like we do here in Willimantic, with more public housing on a per capita basis than anywhere else in the state of Connecticut except Hartford. And so we have that, but then we also have the affordable housing and subsidized housing that's affordable. So we have we have mobile homes here, we have multifamily dwellings here that are not subsidized, condominium complexes, we have single-family homes, and we have some very elegant mansions. So we have the range.
Old Victorian style.
Yes.
Victorians, yeah, we
Absolutely.
we are a town that welcomes everybody,
Yeah.
just like East Hartford,
Absolutely.
just like Hartford, just
Yeah.
like New Britain.
It's where people get
grew
their
up in-
start,
I
right?
grew up in NB.
Yeah.
I mean, I lived in a three-family house until I was about 9 years old.
Right.
My parents paid $8,000 for a small Cape Cod.
Right.
And they worked in the factories.
Yeah.
And they had unions.
Yeah.
And public education, unions back then, that's what made America great.
That's what made the middle class.
That's what made the middle class,
That's
and the
right.
middle class is what made America great.
Yeah, 100%.
As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I grew up in a family where my parents were in their young ages when when the Depression was going on, and they didn't even go to high school.
Right.
And you know, and I was the first one in my immediate family to even graduate from high school.
Right.
And you know, it's just like amazing. What an amazing country.
Absolutely.
I mean, it can be when it works well. But you know, when I left legal aid after 23 years of legal services, I don't remember running into a lot of homelessness.
Yeah.
But it was so different back then because everything was a lot cheaper.
Right.
We were
right.
still benefiting from the post-war
Yeah.
economy.
Got a boom. Yeah. Well, you talk about an $8,000 single-family home, right?
Right.
That Cape is probably $200,000.
I would
At
guess.
least.
Like-
yeah.
Yeah, and I don't, how's a young family and a young individual, right? I mean, I met with some home builders recently. You need $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for the down payment. now,
Right.
Wow.
That's right.
Yeah, it used to be 10,000, and you
Sure.
felt good about it,
Yeah,
right? Now you
exactly.
need tens of thousands of dollars just for a down payment. That's not allowing people to reach. If that's their version of the American dream, that is certainly not providing people the opportunity to reach it.
Exactly. We haven't increased the wages to the same extent that the cost of housing, the cost of health care,
Right.
the cost of all the things have gone up really incredibly, and hasn't kept the wages have not kept pace with those costs, and that's why people can't afford housing these days. But it's also true. Not only did we have a better economy after World War II because we're rebuilding the world. We also had better programs for the low-income population. I remember when I was at Legal Services as well, back when I was doing Medicare, Medicaid work. And some of the things that we didn't just specialize in that one area. We learned all about aid to families with dependent children. We learned all about food stamps, which are now called SNAP. We learned about all those things, how former President Johnson went around in the South and saw people eating sand from the Mississippi River to keep their stomachs full because he said, you can't have people living like that. That's how you got the food stamp program. And now what do we have? We have cutbacks in those areas. And so Representative Rojas and I are faced with those cutbacks. People are saying, well, we haven't really seen a big change yet, but we do know that listening to the radio here on WILI, AM and FM, that we hear all the time about how our soup kitchen is running a big shortage, how they have lost so much money. Why? Because of Doge. Back when President Trump first got elected, and Elon Musk went in and got rid of the surplus agriculture being distributed throughout the country. And so now our soup kitchens are suffering, and they're suffering even worse now that we're going to see a reduction in the access to SNAP benefits.
Right. And that's been, as you know, we continued the emergency declaration. Back, was that last week, I guess?
Yes,
or
we
2 weeks
did.
ago. And that was building on a previous emergency declaration that we did back in November. And, people were critical of us, right? There's no emergency, right? Probably to a lot of listeners here, it seems like there's an emergency. But one of the biggest points that I've tried to make is that this federal government has been so erratic, right? The administration has been so erratic in their decision making that we have to be prepared for the worst now. It used to be that you could count on the federal government to be here, be there, even with continuing resolutions and budget debates going on. There was still a certain amount of certainty that we were able to operate with. We no longer have that. So in the absence of that, what we're doing, actually, I think we stand alone in terms of the approach that we've taken. I think other states are looking to us as a model, but we've created this emergency fund, right, so that the governor can respond as quickly as possible to a lot of significant needs that are out there. And we mostly talk about health care and SNAP benefits, but you alluded to this. There's a lot of organizations out there, nonprofit organizations of all kinds, who have had their funding cut directly to them.
Yes.
Right? It's not just state appropriations that are getting cut. It's just grants that are being eliminated, whether it's higher education, whether it's social service providers, whether it's food security. All of those folks are facing dramatic cuts, and they're all coming to us and looking to us to backfill it. And we've had to be, unfortunately, really honest. We can't backfill every single cut that the federal government is making, but we are prioritizing life and health and safety to the furthest extent possible.
You are doing what you can down there to, put your thumb in the dike, and, and hopefully, there'll be a change in in federal policy soon. I mean, we're gonna need that because, as you say, we can't do that forever.
No.
But I have to really pat you and Susan and a lot of people down at the Capitol on the back, including the governor, for what you have done to help people in need during these really rough times.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. I think it's amazing what we are doing to help, and that's why I love living in the state of Connecticut. Lived here all my life. I love the people here. I love the way people take care of each other. The only thing is, I think the way we're set up in terms of our structure with 169 towns
Yeah.
and over 200 school districts is archaic.
Yeah, it is
And-
very archaic.
And I know you agree, and you're a big advocate for regionalization.
Yeah, regionalizing things where we can, where it makes sense.
Yeah,
right?
I've even gone so far as to say, I mean, I was a probate judge when we reduced
that's
the number
right.
of probate courts, and I knew it was probably going to mean that I would probably have to leave at some point. I was getting near the retirement age anyway, but I advocated for it with Judge Lawler from Waterbury and Don Williams,
Yeah.
and we did get what we wanted. We reduced it down to about 50 courts or something like that. And I don't see any need for more than 50 towns in Connecticut.
And
I
guess
really
what?
People's
People's services are still being met.
yes,
Right? People
Yes.
can still
Sure
get
they are.
access to the probate
Sure
court.
they are.
Right?
In this
Yeah.
day and age, with all the IT capacity we have to have 169 towns, I mean, there are some towns that I represent 3 small towns now. I still am working as a town attorney.
Yep.
Eastford, Andover, and Chaplin, and they're great. I love working with these people. They're good folks.
Sure.
When you really get to know people in Connecticut, they're all good folks.
That's right.
I mean,
That's
there are
right.
very few real bad guys.
Absolutely.
And there are some, but they're very, very few and far between. But they have problems hiring. They have to hire part-time assessors and
Yep.
stuff like that, and it's very hard. So, I'm a great advocate, and I won't talk about it anymore on the show. But I'm a great advocate for consolidating towns. But I would start with school districts.
Well, and I would start with the councils of government, because I think the councils of government are also very, very useful and can be developed to actually have more working together as a group. Because then you have all the mayors, the people from the people in that particular district working together. They know each other. They know what their resources are better than people who are, say, in another part of the state. And they know how they can maybe work together and utilize the resources that they have in that particular area. And so we need to be able to, I think, support them more and have them work more with the towns, whether it's with inland wetlands and water courses or with historic districts, which I've had a couple of bills on those things that I need to be developed more, and I need to talk more around the state to try and get people working together. It'll help expand the economy. It'll help people understand the housing bill that you work so hard on, Representative Rojas. Tell us a little bit about that bill.
Tell us
and
a
how,
lot about it. It's
or a
an
little or a lot,
incredible
or whatever you want to say.
Sure.
But we're very thrilled that all that work, 10 years of work, 10 years of hearings, 10 years of going around the state. You've really worked hard on this, and I think that it's complicated, like you said, but it's going to be a big first step forward. So tell
People
us.
think of this bill, they think of Jason Rowland.
Well, there's a lot of
do.
people, though, who contributed to
Of course,
this bill.
so you don't get something through without a group.
I appreciate kind of, the
But
recognition
you,
of it.
well,
but
you
there's-
were the point person.
But
Well,
there's
you
been a
did a
lot of
great
great
job.
partners on it, whether
Great
it's the
job.
chairs of our planning and development and chairperson of
Sure.
housing, and Senator Duff in the Senate has been a great partner, and Senator Marks has been a great partner as the new co-chair of the Housing Committee. And, really, it is a big bill, right? I mean, obviously a big part of 8002 was actually a recognition that our COGS can play more of a role. Our
Right.
COGS are councils of governments. There are 9 of them in the state of Connecticut. Their governing bodies are made up of all the chief elected officials of their member towns. It's a way for them to get together to try to address some of these public policy issues and services that otherwise should be done on a regional basis. One, in the interest of efficiency. 2, try to save money as well, too, and continue to deliver really good services. So, when we talk about 8002, I think one of the biggest aspects of it is, and it's not terribly interesting, it may not be interesting to a lot of people, right? It is a really robust planning document, right?
Yes.
It is really setting some new parameters and requirements for what municipalities have to include in a housing growth plan. And we were intentional about using housing growth plan because we're actually looking at all types of housing. Most of the conversation tends to be focused around the question of affordability, which is always important. But we also know at the macro level, we need housing of all kinds to be built because that also helps bring down the cost of housing. We need more multifamily housing to be built so that rents can come down. And then certainly, as we alluded to early on, where there's going to be a private market failure, right, the government has to play a role in getting some of this housing built. And it already does play a role, right? Each year we authorize hundreds of millions of dollars in bond authorizations, right, for the Department of Housing to give out low-interest loans, give out low-interest grants, to do some gap financing for market-rate apartments and affordable housing, right? I'm beginning to argue I think we should spend more of those hundreds of millions of dollars on truly affordable housing, and I think you mentioned it a little bit. I'd really like us to see a reinvestment in our public housing authorities.
Oh, yeah.
They have been neglected for much of the last 60 to 70 years, right? Given our first experiment with public housing in which it was built for a certain population of people.
Yeah.
And then when a different population of people started to occupy that housing, primarily African Americans, suddenly the government decided that we weren't going to make an investment in housing. We allowed it to deteriorate.
Absolutely.
And we concentrated poverty. And when you do those things, you get quite a bit of negative outcomes anytime you concentrate poverty like that. Crime is going to increase, jobs disappear, investments by businesses tends to go away. And that's just something that people chose to look away from for a very long time. And what I think we need to do is revisit that. And we have great public housing authorities across the state of Connecticut, many of them in small communities. The bill did include a special fund to give those smaller housing authorities some additional resources to try to build smaller scale developments, right? We're not talking about building the 500 unit or 1,000 unit apartment tower that I think people picture when you think about Cabrini Green in Chicago or some of our larger complexes
We've
in
had
New
some
York.
big ones here.
Yeah, right. Well, we need
Father
some
Panic
smaller
in
scale.
Bridgeport.
Yeah, Father
I
Panic
was
in
involved
Bridgeport.
in the change in Father Panic. It changed to a different mode.
Right.
Yeah. And
Right.
I was still chairman of the housing task force, and I did get involved in that.
Right, but how do we
That
invest
was
in
tough. It was
smaller
a tough thing
scales?
for me to take. I didn't want to take any apartments off the market. Because
Absolutely.
As you know,
Yeah.
the key is the number of units for everybody.
That's right.
Whether they be expensive units or not, because the more units you have, the less likely it is that anybody's going to.
Well, that's been what's been really framing the issue. This is a kind of an economics 101 type of debate we're having. It is a supply and demand,
Yes.
right? And there's a lot of demand for housing, in particular more affordable housing, and a significant lack of supply. And it's not just an issue in Connecticut, it's an issue across the country.
Right.
Based on various estimates, we're 3 to 4 million units short of where we should be right now in terms of development. Because you talk about lack of development, but also people take for granted a lot of units come offline in any given year. And they come off permanently. So when they come off, that decreases the overall level of supply we have, increasing more demand, which has the result of what? Driving up the cost for everybody.
Absolutely.
And that's been a primary motivation on trying to address this issue.
And because, as I mentioned, we have such a variety of housing here, all different types. We have very large multifamily dwellings. We have mobile home parks. But we found, with the housing shortage, then we're having investor-type private equity firms coming in and taking over, but not maintaining the properties. I guess we just saw that happening in Rocking Hill, I think it was, where they had private equity in there, but they didn't maintain the pipes. They didn't make sure that they didn't freeze. And then all these poor people have been out. And so private equity invading all of these different types of housing because they say, hey, we can make a lot of money. We can buy up a whole bunch of housing and really raise the cost of the housing because they own it all, and they'll sell it as they see the biggest profit that they can get based on the investment that they made.
They're increasingly buying single-family homes now,
Correct.
too, for
Yes,
rental.
exactly.
Right? It used to be that single-family home was kind of the prime example of home ownership. But now institutional investors like private equity are buying up single-family homes, increasing the amount of money in any given year that they want to spend on that to essentially take that offline.
Right. You're a UConn grad, and you have a connection to UConn now. I think you have a daughter there.
I do. Yes, she's a
and
sophomore.
UConn is
having a housing crunch.
Well, yeah, and they are selling single-family homes out there to investors, and they are loading them up with students, and they're making a lot of money.
Yeah, because
So,
they're charging per bed, right? Not per bedroom.
Exactly.
Right. So
exactly.
you have a 3-bedroom home with two beds in each one.
Yeah.
That's 6 rent pairs.
Yeah.
Somebody's making a lot of money
lot
off
of
that
money.
housing.
A lot of money.
But
that
they're doing
takes
it. I'm sorry.
No, God, that takes a unit offline
Yeah.
for an individual, for a family, for
Yeah,
anybody. Right?
and that's what's happened right here. And one of the things that I had talked to HUD about and talked to our congressman about over the years is the fact that they generally have a tendency to, when they do the HUD subsidies with Section 8, don't really take into consideration a place like where you have universities that drive the cost up. So when they give the average analysis of what the subsidy will be for fair market value for the Section 8s, for example, they don't raise it to the top like they should in these areas. And I've talked about that, but I haven't really gotten through to making sure that they get to the top, because we need to make sure in these areas especially that we do get to the top. And also maybe just in Connecticut in general, because we are a very high cost state, and some of that's our own fault because we don't share. And
well, part of the reason for that is the problem that the representative here is trying to address with that housing bill. And I think Let's talk a little bit about some of the details about, say, the housing growth plan
Sure.
that is part of the bill.
Yeah, that's really what we're going to do is OPM, the Office of Policy and Management, is going to do a comprehensive needs assessment based on a needs assessment that we had completed 2 years ago to try to arrive at, what is actually the shortage, right? You often hear that
Yeah.
we're 100,000 units short of housing, but I always to remind people that 100,000 unit number is actually for folks at the lowest end of the income spectrum. So as you go up
There's more,
higher in the
yeah.
income spectrum, the actual shortage is about 340,000 units. Right, that is what's projected that could have been built, should have been built over the last 10 to 20
In
years
such a small state.
if we want to address housing
Wow.
costs, right? And again, these numbers are over a long period of time.
Yeah.
When we had the Fair Share Initiative, which allocated a number of units to each municipality
I
that they
recall
had to
that,
plan
yeah.
for, people were losing their minds because they were reading that as you're going to require us to build 5,000 units
Yeah.
of housing next year. No.
Yeah.
We were going to ask you to plan to build housing
Yeah.
over a 10-year period, over
Yeah.
a 20-year period, because part of the challenge with housing is it takes a long time to get it built, which is why there's such an
Yeah.
urgency to do something now. Again, people question whether we needed to do that bill in special session. I would say if we put this
Yeah.
off any
Right,
longer,
right.
people 10 years from now
were-
are going to face an even greater problem than we already have
You
today.
were absolutely right.
And that's why we had the Forstead issue. So we do, our towns, working with our COGs, working with the state, are really going to develop far stronger, more robust housing plans at the local level.
Yep.
We had an affordable housing plan bill already on the books, but it didn't have any real structure around it.
Right.
It wasn't terribly prescriptive in terms of what we should expect towns to do. What we did in the bill was require some different parameters about what should be in that plan, so that it's a more robust plan, a more achievable plan, a more data-driven plan. So that'll be the first step that everybody's engaging in, and we'll do that in a collaborative way, despite all the rancor about we're taking away local control and we're destroying home rule. Those things are not true. We did change the parameters by which towns and municipalities have to plan their zoning. What I like to remind people is that any municipality's power to zone is actually derived from state law. Right, the state of Connecticut is what allows towns to engage in
Title VIII,
zoning.
yeah.
Yeah, Title 8-2. Right, nobody
Yeah,
ever
exactly.
wants to admit
Yeah.
that. And again, we should continue to have these decisions made at the local level.
I think you said that when you spoke on the bill the last time, just before it was voted
Yeah,
on.
it has to be locally informed. I
loved
get
it
that.
when you
Right,
when
but
you
we can't just allow
Yeah.
towns and cities to just do it on their own
No.
because naturally, I think
Well, it's not working.
complacency.
It hasn't worked.
Yeah, people aren't really comfortable with change as much as everybody thinks they
Home
want
rule
change.
is really embedded in Connecticut, and it is.
But we're not a home rule state,
No,
not technically anyway,
not-
right?
Well,
And
yeah.
that's we can get
I
into
think
the
people
legal
think
theory
it
of
is,
that,
yeah.
but we're not a home rule state,
Right,
Because
right,
towns only derive their power from
Yeah.
From the
state
state,
statute
yeah.
or their
The-
charter from the state.
Very
Exactly.
few people
But the-
understand that.
But the idea is that we really want to make sure that the local community understands their own local community, but
Correct.
they don't understand what the neighboring towns are.
Yes.
And so to understand the neighboring towns, like the COGs are great for that because that is how we're going to make the change so that people don't fear what's in the next town. They feel more comfortable with what's going on in the next door town neighbors.
But none of
And
us live in a bubble.
No, and we shouldn't live in a bubble because
Or a
if
silo,
otherwise
as they say.
we will be in a situation where we're going to become a museum if we don't move forward because we're so historic. And museums, as we all know, don't make a lot of money.
Unfortunately,
They should.
they should.
But we don't want to turn Connecticut into a museum. We want to make sure we grow. We have great capacity here with respect to academics. We have great people, great opportunities with Yale and UConn and Eastern and all
Trinity,
the and Trinity,
where I
of
work,
course,
yeah.
Trinity.
Obviously, Trinity.
But all the universities and community colleges and tech schools, all these places are great spots for innovation, and we want to make sure we keep them and our manufacturing that we have here. And the only way we're going to do that is if we access and increase housing at all different levels. And so that's got to be what our focus is. And so I'm so thrilled to be part of your work. And with this bill, it's just fabulous. Tell us some more about
Yeah,
that
I
and
was gonna say,
how it works.
Yeah, another big provision in there was allowing for as-of-right conversion of commercial properties into residential,
Perfect.
only up to 9 units. As we've seen with the kind of the growth in people shopping online, right? It's having a real impact on our main streets, right? Our brick and mortar businesses. So we've seen a lot of commercial buildings decrease in value, decrease in utilization, right? Which has an impact for everybody who owns a home or rents and pays a property tax, right, through their rent. People often forget renters pay property taxes too. It's embedded in their rent.
Yep.
But as we see the value of commercial properties continue to decrease, the cost of that is being shifted to the residential property owner,
that's
right?
how it
So
works.
how do we make it easier for the owner of a commercial property to repurpose that land or that building for a different use? And what we did was allow basically as of right, which means your town still set all the rules, right? They still have to follow setback rules and all that other kind of stuff. But they're able to just go into town hall, put in their application, and begin working on that rather than going through this protracted process of public hearings and the zoning process and all that other stuff, which is an important part of the process, but not necessary for every development that needs to take place. We're going to allow them to convert those properties into either mixed use, which is a plus for any community, or convert it to housing, knowing that we have a significant need for housing. So that was a big reform that was included in the bill.
And let me just ask you to just go back a little bit and get into a little bit of an explanation of the fact that the businesses, in terms of their value, didn't increase, but the residential properties did increase,
Yeah.
which created a great cost shift in property taxes.
Right.
And so if you wouldn't mind going into a little more detail about that, I think a lot of people are very confused about how that occurred.
Yeah, it's whenever a community has revow, right? People
Right.
get really
That's
upset.
what happened to us here.
And it's always interesting because
Happened all over.
people, I think you want the value of your home to go up,
Sure.
right? Because I know you want it to go up as high as possible when you're ready to sell and not necessarily while you're living in it, because if it goes up in value, that means you're going to pay more property taxes on it, right? So it's a double-edged sword that you have to
Yeah,
live
it
with
is.
there. But as we've seen the grand list of communities be negatively impacted by the decrease in commercial values,
Yeah.
right? That dollar has to be made up somewhere, or you have to cut services, right? And we know for any municipality, 60-70% of your budget is education, really important service to provide, followed by police, followed by fire, probably followed by public works, right? And then whatever's left is what you commit to youth services or the library or other services that I think the average taxpayer really, really values. But
Sure.
if you don't make up that dollar somewhere, you got to make a cut. So if you're making up that dollar, naturally it's going to come on the backs of individuals who are paying property taxes on their residence. And that is the big shift that has been slowly taking place over the last couple of years. I think we're starting to see it accelerate a bit. And unless we allow for commercial properties to be reused for something far more valuable, you're going to continue to see property taxes on your home go up unless we allow those folks to repurpose those.
Yeah.
I think in small towns in eastern Connecticut it's happening, and it's I think the handwriting is on the wall, because I talk about consolidating towns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they have a way out. They don't have an awful
They
lot.
don't.
They don't have an awful lot of commercial property.
Right.
And it is causing them to have pretty radical increases in residential property taxes in small towns.
Yeah,
And that is hard to deal with when you don't have a lot of commercial property, and you're probably not going to have a lot in the near future.
Well, at the same time, they don't have any housing.
Right.
So
That's-
even if somebody wanted to move to your community, I mean, the governor always says it, right? We can argue about whether we need more taxes or not, but the governor likes to say, we don't need more taxes, we need more taxpayers.
Yes.
And I think that analogy can play for a lot of small towns in eastern Connecticut, right? We
That-
know
that is absolutely true.
that eastern Connecticut is losing population. It actually lost a
Yeah.
legislative seat,
Yes.
right? That moved to the western part of the state when we
Right.
did redistricting.
Right.
So as some of my colleagues who represent some of the smaller eastern Connecticut towns who are opposed to doing anything on housing, I'm like, you don't have to.
Yeah.
I get it. You don't have sewer, so we're not building a 500-unit building.
Yeah.
But what about a duplex, right? Because a duplex is it is more affordable than a single-family home,
Sure.
and that's an opportunity. You don't
Yeah.
have to change the character of your community completely. You can allow duplexes, triplexes,
Yeah.
quadplexes, smaller-scale housing to be developed. But even that is really difficult to get developed
Well,
in
you
most
could
of
be
our
a-
towns.
You could,
But let me just say,
Jason, you
because
could be a traveling consultant and go around to all these towns and tell them, this is what you should do, and you're
Yeah.
going to make out well, and everybody's going to be happy.
You
but
also-
not, it's hard. It's not simple.
It
But-
isn't.
So one of the things that you mentioned before is the idea of smaller developments in smaller towns, and
Yeah.
that was one of the things. We have a development that is a beautiful job that was done on the corner of Main Street and Church Street that cost $16 million that got us 13 units for more than $1 million a unit. And it's a beautiful job, but the State Historic Preservation Office came in and required all these different things. And one of the things that came out of some of that discussion was the fact that if people said, well, we need to do more development in the smaller towns. And so Barbara McGrath, who helped pull this thing together, she did a great job. She said, well, if we had better subsidies for the smaller towns to be able to do the development, that, it would be much easier to get those duplexes done and those neighborhoods put together than what we have right now. She said the big projects are the ones that actually get the funding, and it's just another aspect of, on the one hand, we have our communities that don't want to work together, and on the other hand, we have resources that they could get if they did work together. Even the COGS could get CDBG money, Community Development Block Grant money, if they work together as a group of 50,000 or more. So that kind of work together would bring in more to those regions if they figured out those plans.
Yeah, and it's always a challenge. I mean, we definitely operate in a world where every developer believes they need a subsidy. I don't know if we've engaged in a little bit of moral hazard here, where you put the dollars out there, people are always going to say they need them.
Right.
I've been kind of taking a more, call myself a supply side progressive, right? Like trying to allow. I sound like almost like a conservative Republican here, right? How about freeing up?
Jason, you don't.
No, well, how about reducing some regulations in government processes to allow the marketplace to respond more effectively to demand?
That is so spot on.
Yeah. I mean, I can't believe this liberal Democrat from East Hartford is the one talking about reducing regulation. We have put a lot of regulations in place. Liberals, like
we
us,
have.
right? Have
We
put a lot
have.
of regulations
Oh, we
in place.
have.
And that adds on a lot of costs.
And I can say I think you might have read that book Abundance. So
well, no,
with
I
Ezra
read
Klein.
a more interesting book. I don't know if you've
Okay.
read it. It's called Why Nothing Works by Mark Dunkelman.
Oh no,
But
I haven't
essentially,
got
it's a
that one.
history.
Susan will jump on that one.
It's a history of the progressive movement, and they make this distinction between Hamiltonian democracy or progressivism and Jeffersonian progressivism, right?
Ooh,
and
I gotta see
it
that.
looks over the last 120 years, and there's these moments in the course of our history where things have happened, and progressives have chosen to respond with government actions, and sometimes it's done way up here at top down, and it's caused problems at the bottom. And so the reaction then is to work from the bottom up and have some solutions that cause problems at this end. It's a real fascinating view of progressivism, which I think more of us who consider ourselves liberal and progressive really need to be mindful of.
Oh, I agree.
I get the ultimate message was to have some level of moderate progressivism, if that makes any sense
I think
at all.
we have to be flexible in all these things. I've been around for a long time. I grew up in a Democratic home. My father was a union guy, and my mother was in the union, but my father led his union for a while. And I have evolved over time and gone in all kinds of different directions because the world is constantly changing every day, and what you both do down at the Capitol is amazing to me. How you can keep up with it and stay on top of it, and I think the housing bill is just an amazing achievement.
Yeah.
I think you got a lot out of it. I think it's pretty amazing. You had the support of the CBIA.
Yes.
And that doesn't happen very often.
Well, they're recognizing
Well,
a
they
lot.
know that it's hurting everybody.
A lot of businesses, in
That's
particular
right.
larger corporations, are sharing with us. They're having trouble finding workers or getting workers to come here because the cost of housing is so significant.
And that's the way
or
we
if
have
you
to
look
do
at
it.
Electric Boat, right, the housing just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right, they have a need for 7,000 people a year to hire.
Sure.
Where are those people going to live? Right, you need to build housing, so they're
They're ready.
importing them from all over the place.
Well, they're important. People live in this town. They work at EB.
I'm sure.
A lot of them.
I'm sure they do. I don't know how long of a drive it is to New
Is it
London
an
from
hour?
here.
It's about an hour.
Nobody should be taking an hour to get to work in
No.
Connecticut, right?
Especially since I work in my garage.
Right, but
I'm a
people
garage lawyer.
people are going to go to where the jobs are, right, to
Yeah.
be able to make a living. And
Yeah.
it's great to have Electric Boat here, but
Oh, it's wonderful.
they have been very
Gotta
vocal
have
as
the
well
housing,
too
yeah.
about needing the housing and different
Yeah.
kinds of housing.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And I hope I think it's going to do a lot of good.
Yeah.
I think there's still going to be adjustments will have to be made
Always.
as you go along. And you know, if anybody's on top of that, it's you, Jason.
Yeah, there
Ross.
isn't a bill that doesn't need adjust. Any
Right,
law that we
right.
pass
Thank you.
right.
Thank
needs
you. Thank
adjusting
you.
the next year
It's
and
so
the next
true.
year.
Everything's
Actually,
changed.
the vast majority of legislation that we pass is actually amending existing law, not
Yeah.
actually creating new law.
Well, a lot of it's going to, you know, what's going
That's
to
so
happen is a
true.
lot of
Yeah.
people who are afraid of this kind of legislation are going to see as it works in practice. They're going to say, hey, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
so you're going to be able to make more gains as you go along.
Yeah.
That's my prediction. And I another issue I wanted to bring up with you, and I recall there was a bill in front of the legislature last year that I know you would be interested in. That was good cause eviction.
Oh, just cause. Yep.
Just cause eviction.
It's back
for-
this year too.
Yeah, it's coming up again.
Yep.
Okay, as a former legal aid lawyer who did supervise an awful lot of people doing eviction defenses, I really am totally into the good cause thing. In fact, I did do some. I think I wrote something to Matt Blumenthal. Was he involved in that bill?
Nothing
Or maybe it was
He's
maybe
a
it was
GAE.
maybe it was Matt Ritter.
Could be.
He may have
I'm
as
not
a speaker.
Yeah. Because I know I gave. I wrote somebody a memo on it. What my 2 cents was.
Yeah.
Having having done this stuff for a long time, but not since 1995.
Right.
But still, that still puts me ahead of a lot of people, and it, I'm very much interested in it. I think people, should be able to, because people are buying up these places, even duplexes, and they're getting rid of the
Right. All the tenants
they're
who have been
raising-
there a
they're
very
raising
long
the
time
rents.
and raising the rents.
And we have a fair rent commission now that just went into
Yep.
being a relatively short time ago. We were not mandatory here, but they finally did it.
Right.
I tried to do it back in the 80s and 90s, and they.
Yeah, we changed the population threshold.
Yeah.
And it applied to
Well,
more
that's-
towns.
That's great.
Yeah.
Right, because there were individuals who live in
That's
small
part of the
towns
bill.
who wanted the ability to, at least share with somebody, right?
Yeah.
That the rents that are being proposed are just so
Yeah.
excessive
Yeah.
that it's actually forcing more people out of their homes.
Absolutely,
right, and
absolutely.
it's what-
That's another big problem.
Yeah.
I mean,
But we have that right
you're
here in-
addressing with the new bill that you
Yeah.
passed.
I mean, our mobile home park was the first group of people that came together in a large group to make sure that we were able to get that Fair Rent Commission passed.
Right.
And our Fair Rent Commission has been on having hearings with really. I go to some of the hearings and listen and talk to some of the people who are claimants, and they are really taking these things up seriously. Nevertheless, the mobile home park is threatening to appeal any of the decisions that are made by the Fair Rent Commission. So we'll be taking a look at how those appeals
We'll
go.
let you know how that turns
Yeah,
out.
absolutely.
Because
that's
that
a
is
big
a
case.
really big deal, and it's something that people are really feeling hurt by, because the mobile home park, to some degree, isn't going by the leases that these contracts that they make with the tenants that are just their mobile homes that they own, but they just rent the property that the mobile home sits on.
Right.
And it's really something that for them not to maintain the property, some of it's in areas that get flooded, and then the mobile home sinks, and then it causes destruction to the mobile home.
Right.
And they have in the lease that the mobile home park owner is supposed to address those types of things. So that is one of the things that we'll be taking a look at, among other things that the mobile home park providers do not address for the population that rents from them.
Susan, if I may, we have an expert here, the majority leader of the House of Representatives, and I just want to know if you, in the last 4 minutes or so we have, would summarize what your expectations are for the session
Oh,
as
good.
the majority leader
Great
at
question.
this point.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Today, sitting
Love it.
here as you
Right, I
are
mean,
in Willimantic, USA.
I haven't done the math, but we're probably down to like 50 working days maybe left. It's a very short
yeah,
it's
short
short,
session
yeah.
set by the Constitution, not by us, right?
That's
The
right.
founders of the state.
Yeah.
The big issue always in the second year, right? We're in the second year of the term and of the biennium.
Yeah.
Is making adjustments to the budget. The governor and the Appropriations Committee is going through their public hearing process right now.
Yeah.
And I know that the governor had to make a lot of tough choices in terms of proposing a budget to us, right? The appropriate step in the process is for the legislature to consider that proposal, make changes to it, negotiate with the governor, and adopt those changes, right, for the second year budget. So that will be for fiscal year 27. We're currently in fiscal year 26.
Right.
Legislators are limited in the kind of bills that they can propose individually, right? We're limited to only proposing bills that have a fiscal impact of some kind, raise a tax, decrease a tax, increase spending, decrease spending. But the committees themselves can raise bills of any kind that they want. So we'll expect to see, 1,000, 2,000 bills proposed. A fraction of those will actually become law.
Sure.
But they'll cover every every issue that you could ever imagine, right?
Yeah.
You know, Just Cause will be one of those in the housing space. There's a big zoning bill that's up for a public hearing, I think, today in the housing committee, which has been the source of a lot of concern for some people. We're certainly going to continue to look at how we're going to respond to the federal government's reductions in spending and their actions. There's certainly an interest in trying to limit the ability of immigration and customs enforcement to do what they've been doing in other states here in Connecticut. I don't know that, you know, they have been operating. Luckily, you know, we're grateful that we haven't seen anything escalate to the kind of things we've seen in other states.
Wonderful.
But it could only be a matter of time, and we want to ensure that people's civil rights are protected, right? We understand that ICE and our public safety folks have a job to do. They need to do that job. We want them to be safe as well, too. But we want to ensure that the civil rights of the people that we represent are protected in the process of ensuring safety for everybody.
And we've done a really good job, I think, of doing that and outlining the fact. I liked what the governor had to say about the fact that when we were accused of being a quote-unquote sanctuary state, which is absurd, that all we're doing is following the Constitution of the state of Connecticut and the United States. We're making sure that we do our police work, which is enforcing all the criminal laws and all the things that the states do, our civil laws and criminal laws, and that then that the federal government does its work, which is the immigration, and that's how they're supposed to work. And that they say you don't get the information, but anybody who's arrested is a public record of arrest, and that's in the paper. It's accessible to everybody. So that there's no hiding of the fact that certain people have been arrested when they were arrested. That's all public information. So a lot of the information that people broadcast about these laws that we pass just to make sure people's civil rights are protected are really kind of inaccurate. You have to really understand that we're just doing it. And I love, there was one person who did an analysis, and I don't want, she said, hey, you wouldn't want to have the state, your local Willimantic police or your state police coming and knocking on your door and saying, did you file your income taxes? Because that's a federal law. And the same with immigration. So.
Okay,
I want to give
we're
you the
down
last
to our
word.
last minute, Jason. It's all yours.
Yes,
Anything
take
you
it
wanna
away.
say
No, listen.
to our listeners here in Willimantic, Wyndham, Mansfield, they're all over the place.
I just really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation because I think it's the kind of thing that most listeners can really benefit from, right? I mean, we need a lot more civic education out there to learn a little bit about the process.
Absolutely.
And certainly to demystify those of us who work in Hartford, right, to the rest of the state. We're kind of like these evil, like, overseers who are trying to make changes to their community. No, we're just trying to pass laws to improve the lives of people and improve the vibrancy of communities, too. And it's great to come out here and give the listeners an opportunity to hear my voice because I'm not from this part of the state.
Fantastic.
Thank
We
you
have
so
had
much.
Jason Rojas. He is the majority leader of the House of Representatives of the state of Connecticut in the House today for the benefit of you listeners. Thank you for tuning in. And I'm here with Susan Johnson, Jason Rojas, and, of course, Matt Rupar. And we will be back next week with another fabulous show. Thank you.